Surf exploration has led to the discovery of many world-class waves in the past 4 decades. The search always had the same goal: to find uncrowded waves in exotic locations. These discoveries, Africa in the 60s, Central America in the 70s, and many islands and atolls in the 80s, always led to the same result: overcrowding. It was easy for us to think that there were no world-class surf spots left to be discovered. At the beginning of the 21st century, there are still a handful of coastlines which remain unexplored for surf. The Makran Coast of Pakistan was one of these. Political upheaval, war, and access problems had deterred everyone else. However, we were prepared to overcome the difficulties of organising such a trip and venture to Pakistan in search of our own perfect wave. It was Alexander the Great who inspired our journey. Surf journalist Stuart Butler had found an image in a book about Alexander's trek. It set his heart racing. It was an aerial photo of an arid landscape with a dried up riverbed snaking down to the Indian Ocean. Waves could clearly be seen breaking into a deep water channel, and they looked like they would be perfect for surfing. It was an image that would stay with Stuart for over a year, until finally he decided he had to go and surf in the Makran Desert. Englishman Stuart Butler is an explorer who writes about the lesser-known coastlines of the world. His sarcastic sense of humour has got him through several tricky situations on his travels. After running from bandits in Colombia, he set his sights on exploring the coast of Pakistan for waves. He didn't quite know what he was letting himself in for. The Makran Coast stretches for 800 kilometres at the northern end of the Indian Ocean. It's one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, with temperatures regularly reaching in excess of 50 degrees Celsius. From June to August, the coast is pounded by swells generated by the southwest monsoon. This is something that hadn't escaped the notice of fellow explorer Antony Colas. Antony's aim is to surf all over the planet. He had already completed 45 surf trips, collecting information for a series of world surf guides. He then turned his attention to the little-known stretch of coastline bordering the Arabian Sea. Whilst on his travels in South America, Stuart had bumped into roaming bodyboarder Ben Clift. Stuart was impressed by Ben's quiet determination and thought it would lend itself perfectly to overcoming the hardships of this trip. I first heard about the trip to Pakistan during a chance meeting with Antony whilst travelling home from filming in Morocco. I smelled an adventure and asked to join the team to record the events as they unfolded. Stuart and Antony spent 6 months locating guides and arranging the relevant passes and visas before flying into Gwadar at the western end of the Makran Coast.
When we flew over, we saw this massive swell line saying, wow, this is much more than expected. It's some places would look like it would be, I don't know, big enough. And one of the amazing sights over flying over this coastline was to see breakers probably several k's out of sea.
Red tape surrounded our visit to the Makran Desert. The Pakistani Navy is stationed in bases all along the coastline, and smugglers regularly use the dunes as camouflage. We had to employ the services of local guides to obtain a non-objection certificate, which would allow us to travel in this region in the company of armed guards. When our first guide Shokat arrived, the locals didn't hesitate to come forward and ask questions. Antony met maybe the Makran's only surfer.
He said the board he mentioned was from the boat. Kashti is a boat.
From the boat, okay.
So you used to pluck it from the boat and just put it.
Okay.
So you surfer, you. Okay. No problem. Big waves. Yes.
while Stuart discovered something a little more sinister.
Do you know about the nuclear explosion carried out by Pakistan since 2 years ago? India is the first enemy of Pakistan, and this is vital for Pakistan that it could carry out the nuclear explosion.
Okay, so, okay.
Sorry, excuse me.
Okay.
Pretty soon our head guide Haroon arrived. He was understandably a little hot and bothered, having driven for 4 days across Pakistan's blistering interior.
What happened was, unfortunately, when he arrived here, the deputy commissioner who was supposed to give
The stamp, okay?
yeah, that guy had to leave in an emergency for Lahore. So after all day yesterday, today I just now got the NOC for you to stay till this for 4 days.
Can we try maybe do our first scouting
We'll go
today?
a little bit
Like
on this side.
south of Gwadar?
Gwadar is the main town in the Makran and was our first base. We drove out to the end of a nearby peninsula. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. From here we'd be able to get our first view out over the ocean, and Stuart would finally be able to see whether his dreams would start to become reality.
Here we are in the tip at the end of Gwadar Peninsula. It was a bit of an effort getting here. The area is closed, there's a military camp. There's waves, glassy, it's good size. So there's surf in Pakistan.
We spent our first night in an old government rest house and made a plan to check westwards towards the Iranian border. Finally, we were going to encounter the full harshness of the desert environment. We set off through a barren landscape. There were no roads to drive on and the heat was intense. We started to get an idea of just how tough it was going to be searching for waves out here. There are only a few small fishing villages scattered along the coastline. At every opportunity, we talked to the local fishermen about the local area and the sea conditions, hoping to find a clue that would lead us to surfable waves. We weren't quite sure whether the guides understood exactly what we were searching for.
Around on the other side? Around, okay, fine.
Pretty soon we found a bay where there were small waves breaking. Anthony started the long task of explaining to our guides exactly what we were hoping to find.
They use what we call bodyboards, and we use surfboards, and other people use longboards.
Yes.
And they need just small waves to have fun. They can ride big waves as well, but a small wave like this, they could use a longboard.
Still unsure of our position, we consulted nautical charts to try and locate potential surf spots.
Maybe this place, because there's no island, maybe, just we should go up, if it's possible, to go towards the point here, because this might take much more swell than this, which is too much sheltered, too much tucked in.
So what we have to do is we can go just around this.
Exactly.
After several more hours of searching, we came to a small fishing village set at the foot of high cliffs. From the top of the cliffs, we could see waves breaking a kilometre out to sea. We decided that instead of paddling our surfboards out to the waves, we should try and rent a boat from one of the local fishermen.
So we were asking about the boat and horsepower and what kind of engine they had, and apparently they're keen to go. Maybe not as close to the surf as we think, but they're keen to go. And now, we're trying to find the right price. And what do you think is a fair price to rent a boat here, considering the gas cost, considering the boat, considering the local cost, and how much they earn. So you come to a price, and we say, okay, this is this price. But I don't know.
He says 3,000.
Is it a local custom to negotiate, to bargain? Because in some countries,
The thing is, it is, but we are supposed to bargain. But the thing is, this is the first time.
Yeah, sure.
Heaven for us.
Okay. I think $50 for one day is is too much. Comparing to what we know to other places in the world where the local costs are similar. Let's say 1,500 rupees. Okay, like we say half the price.
2,000 he says this is the last bottom price.
Okay.
We settled on a fee of $25, worth the same as a week's work to these fishermen. We were suddenly the centre of attention in the village. These people had never seen Westerners before, especially not ones who wished to be taken out to sea. We soon understand why we had our guards, Ali and Hassan, with us. It was to stop the locals all around us tearing our towels off while we got changed.
The armed guard has let everyone forward.
The local fishermen don't usually venture into the sea at this time of the year, fearing that their boats will capsize in the monsoon waves. They told our guides that we were going to drown.
We got a little scared because a wave broke on us, and so we come back towards the beach.
We got out there and we couldn't find a way through, and ended up having a very close shave. Wave came, tipped us one way, tipped us the other, but by some act of God we managed to hold on in there. So we thought, well, waves aren't worth it, so sod it, came back in. And I think we're just going to paddle out there and try our best just on our boards.
So that first surf at Jebel Sur was amazing because of the place and surrounding. And when we got back, it was unreal just to have all this friendly of the village and everyone just touching boards and everything. I think that was the purest feeling as far as surf discovery. The fishermen and the kids all amazed of what happened.
Bye-bye!
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Okay. Wow. That's crazy. Okay.
After 3 days in Gwadar, we left the comfort of the rest house bound for Pasni, 180 kilometres to the east. The only other transport on the roads were lorries bringing fresh food in from Iran and the occasional overloaded bus. Whilst other people simply appeared out of the dunes. We stopped for food at a roadside hotel in the middle of nowhere and ate the basic local food of flat chapati bread and a spicy lentil curry. Ali and Hassan were there to protect us from smugglers. The stretches of coast between the main towns in the Makran are unpopulated and extremely isolated, making them the perfect place for smuggling heroin. There are also Coast Guard stations positioned along the coast. The roads linking these were often our only points of access. Unfortunately, they always ended at stretches of featureless coastline.
Look at the beach. It's in between some big shipwreck we've seen and let's say the Gwadar Bay where it's flat and the waves are so mushy. So here you could say on no wind or on offshore wind, there could be some peace. So nothing promising, but well, the profile of the beach looks a little bit better.
Here, we are going to this Shimal Bandar.
None of the spots we checked between Gwadar and Pasni left any kind of impression. We started to wonder if we were going to find any decent waves. And it wasn't just us surfers finding it tough. The rest of the team were suffering from the heat and the dust as well.
Well, apparently Haroon last night told us that up the coast near Karachi there's been some flash flooding, and we might have to, if we travel up the coast, obviously we'll have to pick up some more information on the way, and you know, rain and stuff. It looks pretty rainy around here actually, so it could be an interesting night. We might have to come back here and take an inland road to get to Karachi, which might take a day out of our trip, which wouldn't be that good really, but you know, these things happen when you're in these places, so.
Here comes Haroon with the news. Are we allowed to stay or no?
When we arrived in Pasni, we had to register with the district commissioner to get his permission to stay in his town for the next few days. We also had to swap our guards for ones with a greater knowledge of the local area.
What's the news then, Haroon?
Yeah, everything okay, you know these guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, they just... I cannot understand, neither can I explain what these guys want. Anyway.
Together with the coast guards, district commissioners of each region form a chain of communication along the entire length of the coast. Passing surfers are not the norm in the Makran, and this often created confusing and frustrating situations.
I'm supposed to tell these guys also.
Well, to be quite honest, I haven't got a bloody clue what's going on while we're changing guards. It all seems very hectic and very pointless.
It's clear.
Who was that guy, Haroon?
He's the assistant commissioner. Now he's a reasonable guy, you see.
Yeah, you see
the way he talks, the way he understands things. He doesn't try to show that he's something out of this world. Now everything is alright.
Because of the delay of the local official, we've been stumbling around in the dark really for the last half hour and managed to get ourselves, I think, a bit lost, and got a jeep stuck in the sand, and it's all getting a bit stupid. So might as well camp here for the night, eh? Good a spot as any.
By now our morale had started to drop due to the lack of decent surf.
I think it's about 6:30, 7ish maybe. Just come back from the point. We got up about 6 to go and check it just when the sun came up. There's no definite peak, it's breaking all over the place. Maybe on a bigger swell, but I'm not that optimistic. So I'm afraid we're going to have to go and search the little shore breakout in front of the tents.
Our guards got their first opportunity to see us surfing at close quarters. We were surprised to find that they weren't very interested. Our cook needed to stock up on food for our 4-day stay in Pasni. It gave us a chance to explore the lively bazaar. We found out that due to its position and old trade and invasion routes, Pakistan is a kaleidoscope of people and languages. Every town is full of faces which look Arab, Mongol, Indian and even European. It reflects waves of migration from all over Eurasia.
Lassi, which is like a yogurt drink with lots of sugar. It's very refreshing.
Okay, let's go and have a mango juice.
The local language Urdu means bazaar in Persian. In the 15th century, raiders came from Persia and Afghanistan. In the evenings, the soldiers would come together in the bazaar, with Turks, Pathans and Punjabis all speaking different languages. Eventually, out of these languages came one, Urdu, so called because it was created in the bazaar.
Well, if we have to make a little sum up of this trip now, we've discovered that there's more swell than we thought. But the coastline has got a problem. The coastline has got a problem with it's either too steep, either too flat, but mostly either too flat. It's frustrating. So the only place which is out of sea from this Makran Coast is called Astola. It's an island where there used to be so many flies that you couldn't bear it.
In order to get away from the shallow coastline, Antony decided that we should explore an uninhabited island called Astola. It's 6 hours offshore from Pasni, and probably one of the most remote places on Earth. The rest of us weren't so sure it was a good idea.
It might be just the most epic right-hander right here on this channel. I don't know what you think, guys.
Once again, Antony's extremely optimistic outlook on life has failed to mention to us that this book, written by some people who explored the Makran Coast and went out to Astola Island, quote from the book, "I first rowed Barbara into the beach, avoiding the snake-filled tidal pools." We then find out on the next page that the island is actually cursed to anyone who steps foot on it. Anything else, Antony, that you feel you should tell us about this island?
I have to say to Stuart, because obviously it's a little bit English, and so I have to counterbalance, otherwise, Let's say we're gonna have killer views at the coast, and then we're gonna be able to see this island, which is a major feat. We're gonna have a boat trip.
The next morning we went to see the district commissioner about getting a fishing boat out to Astola Island. He introduced us to Captain Ebul, who said he would take us there, but he warned us it wouldn't be easy.
He says that he's going to show you places, you're going to be ship scared.
When we arrived at the harbour, we found that a strong wind was blowing with force over the sea and making the boat seem rather frail.
Yes, we are in Pasni Harbour and wondering, if we're gonna get on these crummy boats. Obviously, these boats don't look as good as we thought they were gonna be.
The sides of the boat are about 3 feet above the water in the harbour, and they're rocking around there. And out at sea, there's probably a 10 to 15 foot swell. So much to my great disappointment, we're not going. Damn, eh?
Having abandoned the boat trip, we visited a nearby Coast Guard station to ask for advice about the coastline to the east of Pasni.
Basically, an hour towards this side might reveal like a creek where there could be potentially a world-class point break.
The Coast Guards offered to be our guides, and we set off following them to the creek they had told us about, hoping to find a perfect point break wave. Pretty soon we were well and truly lost.
Right, we're in the middle of absolutely nowhere, somewhere in the Makran Desert, totally lost, bouncing around in search of Antony's world-class wave. We've got a box of cream crackers to eat, which is always good to have in the desert, and half a bottle of warm water. God,
now we stopped in the middle of this riverbed. We've been waiting for these soldiers to check with someone that lives here, because that's one of our problems. There's not that much population where we're going, so it's very hard to ask for directions. So these two guys get to confirm that we're on the right track. And it looks like we're on the right track, so very soon we're going to be able to contemplate that matey, powerful point break, the one we're looking for.
We wondered if the creek actually existed, but after 2 more hours of dusty driving, we finally crested the final dune.
Well, as you can see, we found it at last. World-class surf spot. Firing beach break that doesn't really gonna do anything at all. No swell, no banks, no nothing.
Right, we've just had a really fun day thanks to the Frenchman. We've done this huge roller coaster through the desert where we broke down and got lost and various things to find the world's flattest wave, just to come right back to where we started from to find out that it's nothing special, but it's normal. So it's pretty much like a day at home, actually driving around for hours on end just to end up where you started from, but more dusty this time. And so we've come up with this new rule that the Frenchman isn't allowed to make any decisions at all. He's not allowed to look at his maps. He's definitely not allowed to speak to any locals who say, "Ah, yes, I know where there's a good wave, I'll take you now." The Frenchman has lost all his rights. There's been a revolution and the English are taking over on where to pick the surf spots.
We set off again the following day. The harshness of the environment had started to take its toll on the jeeps. Pretty soon we had to stop to make some repairs and evaluate our situation. At the moment, what's happening is we're trying to check every place where there's access. So now we need to look more closely at the map. We need to try and find somewhere where it's deep water close to the coast, combining with a point, and just keep asking the local people and maybe draw diagrams for them because to get them to understand what we're looking for.
What he's been drawing, here, look at his drawings. It's just ideal, and it's very near to Pasni. It's very promising, I tell you. I don't want to sound too optimistic, and basically because now I think this little man, Captain Abdul, he understands what we're looking for. I think it's gonna show us the right place.
The captain led us towards a river mouth, all the while assuring us we would find what we were looking for.
Talk to the camera, Anthony. What have we just found, Anthony?
Okay, I can't remove my binoculars, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on it. Okay, the situation, we're right on this point break, we're looking at it, and the problem is we can't get there right now because the Coast Guard has to confirm that we have a permit. But right now in my binoculars, what I can see is a flat headland just sticking out at sea, and on the outside is about a 4-foot right, and on the inside is about a 2-foot, but it's so tubular. We can see the eye from here, which is dark. It's a dark eye.
How far away are we from it?
Well, we might be okay from here. We might be okay to 2 Ks.
Right, we found the point. I told you, I knew all along, I was highly optimistic the whole time that we were going to find the business, but we haven't been given permission to go here yet, and the Coast Guards here are a little funny with us.
As we arrived, 2 Coast Guards came running towards us and they informed us that yesterday night, around about 200, I repeat, 200 smugglers was trying to smuggle in Scotch whiskey and bring in Scotch whiskey and take over hashish opium. And they've got 60 people they've arrested. They've got 6 to 8 camel loads of Scotch and the other drugs. And they've gotten off the area. There are still 140 people around in these hills, and there is a crossfire since early morning today. That is 2:30 onwards. They're shooting. And they did not stop us from going to that area proceeding, but said if you leave, you will go on your own risk further up. Because
we're going anyway. They're not going to stop us.
Well, it looks like our classic surf spot looks about 3 inches big, if that's it. So, bloody hell. Disappointment.
It appeared a trick of the light had made the waves look bigger than they actually were, and forevermore that wave would be known to us as mirages. With both the smugglers and the Coast Guards resting and re-evaluating their situations, we headed into the water for the most surreal of surf sessions. One where wildly differing lifestyles, cultures and values were thrown together by the addictions of heroin and surfing.
I caught one wave which was pretty long and I could feel doing some distance, and it's like, well, I'm just pumping that wave, but you know, it's good fun just to follow just close to the shore and being able just to jump straight from the sand to the surf when you see the set. Well, you know, it was not enough power in that wave, but well, a wrapping point wave.
After 3 days in Pasni, and with only 1 week of our journey remaining, we travelled another 200 kilometres east, towards the military town of Ormara. Once again our map showed headlands and coves that looked promising, but to reach them involved the toughest travelling we were to encounter in the Makran.
Well, yeah, it's getting tough. It's getting tough. This one's getting tough because we have 99% of getting a straight onshore situation, which is not surf. So we had the Coast Guard, and they check in that that everything's fine, for this area, that we have a permit to get there.
Another one of Antony's fine ideas, which even he says isn't promising, this place, because it's going to be onshore anyway and just a beach break.
Obviously, we're going to the place just to have a look, just for our conscience. Like, let's say we meet someone in 10 years from now, it's like, what? You haven't checked Basul? Wow, my guys, you must have been stupid. Basul is just the best river mouth left in the world.
So far we had checked 17 spots in 2 weeks. More often than not had been disappointed. Basul Beach turned out to be no different.
Some sets are pretty bad, some sets are okay, and okay surf is better than no surf sometimes. So it just looks a little bit unorganized.
To add to this, we now encountered a new problem.
I turned to paddle for a wave, and I just got a big bolt of pain across the back of my knee, and fell off my board. Must have rolled and fell onto it, whatever it was, that jellyfish, I guess. And I tried to see what was going on, and I think I've got my hands on it. It didn't feel that bad when I got out of the water. I managed to stand up and surf a wave in, and just walked up the beach, walked back to here, and by the time I got here I just couldn't stay still. And it's just gone around the back of my knees, across the top of my knees, and around my back. But the weirdest thing is, as I started to walk around, and I guess it went into my blood, it just spread up to my groin. My fingers are now tingling. I pissed on it, on the advice of Stuart, and seems to be going down. At least I don't have to keep moving anymore. So experience for me, that's never happened to me before anywhere, and I'm not going back in there for a while.
It's actually raining in the Makran Desert. When did it last rain, Ben?
About 3 years ago.
We're about to leave, so it's the end of our kind of short stay here in Ormara Beach, and our last draw card is going to be Gadni.
From the plane, we had seen a bend in the coast at Gwadar, a small town a short way from Karachi. It looked like it may be an ideal setup for surf. To get there from Ormara involved a 2-day drive, heading inland and upwards into the central Makran mountain range. After crossing a spectacular high pass in the mountains, we dropped down to vast empty plains where we set up camp for the night. Early the next morning, we continued our journey and almost immediately hit the smooth tarmac of the road that leads into Karachi.
We're just now outside some DC or AC's house, trying to get permission so we can hopefully get a Gadani and try and surf around there.
And according to the assistant commissioner who is in charge of this whole area, he is saying foreigners are not allowed at all into Gadani or Somiani. And I tried to explain to him where we are coming from. We have an NOC for the Balochistan Makran Coast. He says this area and Somiani are totally out of bounds.
Yeah, that's pretty gutting that we can't go there, but I'd rather stay in Karachi.
And so we found ourselves pushed into the centre of one of Asia's largest and most hectic cities. In contrast to the silent dunes, the streets are crowded and noisy. This is a city suffering from political and ethnic tensions. And this was brought home to us on the night we arrived, when 12 people died in a bomb blast close to where we were staying. Maybe it was a chance to change our clothes and wash away the grime of the desert. Maybe it was the joy of a soft bed and ample food. But despite all of Karachi's negative points, the city was actually an enjoyable place to hang out for a few days. While Karachi is by no means a holiday resort, it does have many beaches where the locals come at weekends to escape the violent city and cleanse themselves in the ocean. Stuart and Ben found a beach that was perfect for bodyboarding and put on a display for the locals. With one day left before our departure, we headed towards a river mouth that we'd seen from the plane at the beginning of our trip. It didn't take long for Anthony, Stuart and Ben to take the opportunity for their final surf. I stayed on the beach to chat with the locals. It turned out that surfing wasn't an entirely new concept to them.
He's been telling me before that they have a wooden plank. On the plank, these boys go further up, but their parents stop them not to go into the deep. They're scared of the sharks. But they are crazy for water, and even the small kids follow the elder brothers into the sea. And they roll around, they play around. And I just asked him if he would like to go on the surfboard, and he says that if given an opportunity, he would like to surf like the white man is doing, only if somebody could teach him.
We organised a surf lesson for the village kids. They were naturals and quickly picked up the basics. When we ran out of boards to go around, they paddled out on their fishing rafts and tried to surf on them.
Tell him he's going to be able to try as many times as he wants, because we're going to leave him the board. So this board is for you and the kids of the village, okay? And every year he has to teach 3 kids.
He says thank you very much that he's tried to teach me. And I will really take care of the board and try to teach the kids of the village how to do it.
well, sum up all this extraordinary adventure that we had, like, you know, being pioneers in a way. You know, pioneers in the 21st century is a very rare thing. We've been trying hard, we found some spots, and, you know, and no one was injured, and just, you know, everybody took care. Yeah, you know, obviously, great trip.
My first impressions about surfing, well, it's even more exciting than I thought, you know, because it looked so damn easy when you see it in television or whatever, and to actually go and there's only one day when I tried, you know, and then I realized it's very difficult. You need a lot of practice.
This hard adventure across the Makran Coast, which was pretty tough, I must say, according to all standards. There was no easy thing with this heat and no basic facilities. With this whole ecological pattern changes, maybe the wave also gives a rise and attracts you with the swell, and maybe with the low pressure you come back again to Pakistan.